My eyes snapped open, not to the gentle caress of morning light, but to the unholy shriek of a smoke detector inches from my face. Except, wait, this wasn't my smoke detector. My smoke detector had been recently upgraded to a model with a soothing female voice that politely informed you of a potential hazard. This one sounded like a banshee gargling gravel. Panic, thick and immediate, clawed at my throat. Where was I? Disorientation warred with a primal urge to escape the ear-splitting noise. Then, fragments of memory, sharp as shattered glass, pierced the fog. Carol, the bypass, the dust. The banshee wailed on, relentless. I scrambled up from a pile of what felt suspiciously like insulation. The air was thick with an acrid, unfamiliar smell. Definitely not my apartment. This wasn't my beige-on-beige prison cell in Whispering Pines. This was chaos. A coughing fit racked my body. I flailed blindly, knocking over something metallic that clattered loudly. The shrieking in my ear intensified. It was then I realized I was tangled in a mass of wires, the offending smoke detector dangling precariously close. Son of a... I muttered, wrestling free. As I finally ripped the demonic device from its moorings, plunging the immediate vicinity into blessed, temporary silence, my eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through a grimy window. This wasn't just not my apartment. It wasn't even remotely like my apartment. Exposed brick walls, graffiti that looked less like art and more like territorial markings, and the lingering scent of stale beer and something vaguely chemical filled the air. Where in the actual hell had I ended up? And then the ground vibrated. Not a subtle tremor, but a deep, guttural rumble that seemed to emanate from the very bowels of the earth. A siren, distant at first, began to wail. But this wasn't the anemic HOA-approved beep of a malfunctioning smoke alarm. This was the full-throated cry of a city in distress. My blood ran cold. 2 minutes. That's all it had been. 2 minutes since Carol, the self-appointed queen of Whispering Pines, had smugly flipped the switch on the building's fire alarm control panel, silencing the insistent beeping caused by Gus's overzealous drywall sanding. 2 minutes since I'd looked at Gus, a manic glint in my eye, and uttered the words that had clearly led to this. Whatever this was. Let's rewind, shall we? Back to the relatively simpler times, when my biggest problem was the soul-crushing monotony of my rental's kitchen. I'd finally scraped together enough cash to buy a place, a condo in the charmingly named, and deceptively sinister, Whispering Pines. Peaceful, serene, the brochure had lied. What it should have said was, prepare to enter a meticulously regulated hellscape governed by the iron fist of a woman named Carol. Carol. Just the name conjures images of sensible shoes, a severe bob haircut that defied gravity, and a binder overflowing with HOA bylaws that she treated like the Dead Sea Scrolls. My first encounter with her, mere hours after I'd wrestled a flat-packed IKEA desk through the lobby, should have been a warning. Her eagle eyes had spotted my welcome mat, a perfectly innocuous welcome emblazoned on durable coir, and deemed it 1.5 inches wider than regulation. A citation followed. My welcome to Whispering Pines was less warm embrace and more sternly worded legal document. My kitchen, however, was my personal Mount Everest of beige despair. Formica countertops the color of sickly butter, particle board cabinets that groaned under the weight of a single cereal box. It was a culinary wasteland. I envisioned sleek quartz, soft close drawers, a glorious gas range. My dream was a sanctuary, a place where I could whip up culinary masterpieces, or at least reliably toast a bagel. Enter Gus, my contractor. A man whose walrus mustache seemed to hold the wisdom of 1,000 home renovations. He took one look at my kitchen and sighed, a sound that spoke volumes. "Yep, gut job." He'd sized me up, a hint of knowing amusement in his eyes. "You got an HOA here, right? Let me guess. The president's name rhymes with ghoul?" Gus was a prophet. He navigated the labyrinthine HOA application process with the weary expertise of a seasoned explorer. Permits in triplicate, insurance certificates notarized, architectural modification forms that required the structural integrity analysis of a Lego castle. We jumped through every hoop. Carol, naturally, was the gatekeeper. Her approval delivered with the grudging air of a warden releasing a particularly troublesome inmate. Demolition day arrived with the promise of progress and the immediate reality of dust. Gus's team had erected plastic sheeting that looked like a biohazard containment zone, and industrial air scrubbers whirred hopefully. But the moment the first sledgehammer connected with the ancient drywall, a primordial cloud of dust billowed forth, triggering the building-wide fire alarm. That infernal klaxon. It was a sound designed to pierce the soul and ignite immediate panic. Residents, bleary-eyed and disheveled, stumbled into the hallway, and there, amidst the chaos, stood Carol, Sir Reginald, her perpetually yapping Pomeranian clutched in her arms, her face a mask of righteous fury. "Unit 3B!" she shrieked over the din. "I should have known. This is what happens when we allow unregulated construction." The fire department arrived. A single, world-weary firefighter who looked like he'd seen this rodeo 1,000 times. He reset the alarm with a sigh and a look that said, "Welcome to condo living." Carol, however, was far from done. Before the firefighter's truck had even left the parking lot, she'd slapped a first warning for nuisance alarms on my door. The Cold War had officially begun. The following week was a masterclass in petty tyranny. Carol weaponized the HOA bylaws with the precision of a seasoned legal assassin. Contractor hours were slashed due to noise pollution. Gus's truck received a parking violation for being microscopically over the line. I was fined for dust residue in the hallway, a single microscopic footprint captured in a blurry photo. She even complained about the noxious fumes of drywall primer threatening EPA intervention. Gus, bless his mustachioed soul, remained remarkably calm. "This woman," he'd grumbled during one exasperated phone call, "could find a violation in a blank piece of paper." But even his patience was wearing thin. The drywall sanding loomed, the dustiest phase of the entire operation. "We gotta tape the detector," he'd suggested, his voice low. "Cover it completely. It's against code, but so is half the crap she's pulling." I hesitated. Breaking actual laws felt like a step too far, even against Carol. "Let's just be meticulous," I'd countered, a plan already forming in the back of my mind. The special executive session of the board felt less like a formal meeting and more like a public shaming. Carol presented a PowerPoint presentation. Yes, a PowerPoint detailing my reign of terror. Slides included the infamous dust footprint, an amateur decibel reading taken with her phone, and a truly terrifying bar graph titled "The Escalating Frequency of Alarm Events." My defense, a calm recitation of permits, plans, and the unavoidable nature of construction dust, was met with icy glares. Mr. Henderson, a quiet retiree from 4B, dared to point out the statistical benefits of functioning, even if occasionally oversensitive, alarm systems. Carol dismissed him with a withering look. The verdict was swift: a $500 fine for any subsequent false alarm. The financial stakes had been raised. Predictably, the next round of drywall sanding triggered the alarm. Gus's team had created a veritable dust-proof fortress within my kitchen, but a microscopic breach was all it took. The living room smoke detector shrieked, followed by the building-wide klaxon. This time the neighbors didn't even bother evacuating. The collective groan that echoed through the building was palpable. Carol's arrival at my door was instantaneous. She didn't utter a word. She simply held up her phone, the screen displaying a pre-typed email. Official notice, $500 fine assessed. She hit send with a triumphant flourish. That's when it happened. Down in the lobby, as Gus and I waited for the fire department, again, Carol, in a fit of peak HOA president madness, marched over to the fire alarm control panel. She produced a key, the HOA master key, and, ignoring Gus's frantic warnings about federal offenses, flipped a switch. The building fell silent. "I am placing the system on test/bypass mode," she announced, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction, "to prevent further nuisance alarms." That's when the idea hit me. The local alarm was silenced, but individual detectors still functioned, and a silent alarm, triggered without a corresponding bypass signal, would go straight to the monitoring company. "Gus," I'd whispered, a dangerous grin spreading across my face. "How much dust can you make in the next 2 minutes?" His walrus mustache twitched. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Kid," he'd replied, his voice low and conspiratorial, "I can make it look like a snowstorm in Pompeii." And that's how I ended up here. Not in my dust-filled condo, but in this urban wasteland. The distant sirens were getting closer, their mournful cries echoing through the grimy window of this squat? Was I in a squat? The last thing I remembered was Gus aiming the orbital sander directly at the living room smoke detector, creating a blinding white cloud. The local alarm had beeped furiously, but the building remained eerily silent. Then, the faint wail of distant sirens. But how had I gone from my condo to this? Had Carol somehow retaliated? Had the fire department, upon discovering her illegal bypass, decided to take me into custody for something? This was beyond anything I could have imagined. The door to the squat, a warped piece of plywood barely hanging on its hinges, creaked open. A figure stood silhouetted against the dim hallway light. Tall, broad-shouldered, and definitely not wearing an NYPD uniform. "Who's in here?" a gruff voice demanded. My mind raced. Wrong apartment?" I stammered, my voice cracking. The figure stepped inside, revealing a man with a shaved head, multiple facial piercings, and a t-shirt that looked like it had survived a zombie apocalypse. He held a crowbar loosely in one hand. "This ain't no apartment, newbie," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "This is Sector 7, and you ain't from around here." Sector 7? Newbie? This was definitely not Whispering Pines. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding," I began, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I think I might be lost." The man chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Lost? In the zone? That's a new one." He gestured around the dilapidated room with the crowbar. "Welcome to the Thunderdome, friend. You're a long way from your beige little condo." My stomach dropped. How did he know about my condo? About the beige? Was this some elaborate revenge plot orchestrated by Carol? Had she hired thugs? Just then, the sirens outside reached a fever pitch. They were right outside, multiple vehicles. But these weren't the familiar wail of fire engines. These were different, higher pitched, more urgent. The man with the crowbar moved to the grimy window and peered out. His eyes widened. "Scrapers," he hissed. "They're early." Scrapers? What in the world were scrapers? Suddenly, the plywood door burst open, revealing not uniformed officers, but more figures. A ragtag group of people armed with makeshift weapons, pipes, lengths of chain, even what looked like a garden rake modified for combat. "He's in here!" one of them yelled, pointing at me. "The outsider!" Outsider? Zone? Scrapers? My brain struggled to process the onslaught of bizarre information. This wasn't just a bad day. This was a descent into a full-blown dystopian nightmare. Before I could even attempt to explain, I was grabbed roughly by two of the newcomers. "Hey, what are you doing? Let go of me!" I protested. But my pleas were ignored. They dragged me out of the squat and into a scene of utter chaos. The street was lined with wrecked vehicles, their windows smashed, tires slashed. Buildings were crumbling, some blackened by fire, and moving slowly down the street like monstrous metallic insects were things. Large armored vehicles with flashing blue lights and what looked like some kind of collection apparatus on the front. Scrapers. The people around me were yelling, throwing rocks and debris at the approaching vehicles. Some were trying to barricade the street with overturned cars. It was like something out of a Mad Max movie, but somehow grittier, more desperate. And in the middle of it all, being dragged along by two very unfriendly individuals, was me, Leo Maxwell, formerly concerned with countertop materials, now apparently an unwelcome intruder in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Then, I saw it. Painted crudely on the side of a half-destroyed building, a familiar, loathed symbol. A perfectly straight, rigidly defined pine tree inside a circle. Below it, in faded letters, Whispering Pines, Sector 7 Annex. My jaw dropped. Sector 7 wasn't some random wasteland. It was part of Whispering Pines? How could this be? Just then, one of the scrapers deployed a metallic arm that snaked out and grabbed a chunk of debris from the street. It retracted with a grinding sound. "They're taking what's left!" someone screamed. "Fight them back!" Fight them back? I was still trying to figure out how I'd gotten here. One of my captors shoved me towards a makeshift barricade. "Get behind there and throw something!" he yelled. I looked around wildly. The air crackled with tension, the roar of the approaching vehicles deafening. People were scrambling, their faces etched with fear and anger. And then I remembered. 2 minutes. The station siren. But not my station. This was a different kind of station altogether. Could it be? Had my little act of malicious compliance somehow triggered this? Had I inadvertently unleashed some kind of automated urban cleanup crew, misinterpreting a silent fire alarm in the most catastrophic way imaginable? The absurdity of it all hit me, a wave of hysterical disbelief washing over the fear. I'd gone from battling an overzealous HOA president to being caught in the middle of a territorial dispute with garbage trucks from hell. This was so much worse than a $500 fine. And as the first of the scrapers rumbled to a halt in front of our barricade, its metallic arm whirring menacingly, I had a terrifying realization. My kitchen renovation had just become the least of my problems. My biggest problem was figuring out how to survive the fallout of setting off the wrong damn siren. The man with the crowbar, whose name I'd learned was Razor, shoved a rusty pipe into my hands. "You fight, newbie, or you become scrap." My hands trembled. I looked at the approaching behemoth of metal, at the desperate faces of the people around me, and at the crumbling remains of what was apparently my neighborhood. This was going to be a long day, and it all started with a little dust and a very, very wrong button. The rusty pipe felt alien in my hands. It was heavy, poorly balanced, and smelled faintly of tetanus. I'm a guy whose primary occupational hazards are carpal tunnel and accidentally using the wrong hex code for a client's logo. I wield a Wacom stylus, not a makeshift bludgeon. Razor gave me a shove. "What are you waiting for, newbie? An engraved invitation? Hit it!" Hit it? It was a 10-ton automated behemoth that looked like a dumpster fire had a baby with a tank. It had no discernible face to punch, no vulnerable spot that screamed, "Strike here for massive damage." It just was. A monument to aggressive sanitation. "What's the plan, exactly?" I yelled over the grinding gears of the approaching scraper. "Do we have a weak spot? Are we aiming for the grabby arm thingy's elbow joint?" Razor just stared at me. "The plan is to make a lot of noise and hope it gets confused and leaves." That was it. That was the master strategy. The Sector 7 equivalent of turning it off and on again. My confidence, already at a subterranean level, began digging for the Earth's core. The scraper rumbled closer, its single, unblinking blue optical sensor sweeping across our pathetic barricade of rusted car parts and broken furniture. It stopped about 20 feet away. A series of clicks and whirs echoed from within its chassis, like it was thinking. Then, a surprisingly polite, synthesized female voice, eerily similar to the one in my new smoke detector, emanated from a speaker grill. "Alert, unsanctioned assembly. Please disperse. This area is scheduled for compliance remediation." "See? It's reasonable," I said, lowering my pipe. "Maybe we can just talk to it." A woman with a shock of bright pink hair and welding goggles perched on her forehead scoffed next to me. "Oh yeah, newbie. Talk to it. Last guy who tried that got his collection of antique hubcaps remediated into a 4-inch cube. I'm Jinx, by the way. Try not to get remediated." Before I could ask what being remediated entailed, Razor let out a guttural war cry and hurled a brick at the scraper's optical sensor. The brick bounced off with a pathetic tink. The scraper's blue light flickered to red. "Warning, hostile action detected, escalating to Level 2 compliance enforcement." Its big metal arm, the one I'd so cleverly dubbed the grabby arm thingy, whirred to life. It wasn't fast, but it was relentless. It extended towards our barricade, its 3-pronged claw opening and closing like a hungry metal beak. "Scatter!" Razor bellowed. Everyone scrambled. I, having no idea where to scramble to, simply stumbled backward, tripped over a loose chunk of concrete, and landed hard on my backside. The rusty pipe flew from my grasp. I was a sitting duck. The giant claw ignored the screaming, brick-throwing residents. Its red sensor seemed to lock directly onto me. No, not me. Something next to me. With surprising delicacy, the claw bypassed my trembling form and plucked a small ceramic object from the rubble. It was a garden gnome, faded and chipped, wearing a pointy red hat and holding a tiny fishing pole. The claw retracted, holding the gnome up to its optical sensor for a long, silent moment. It was scanning it. "Violation identified," the polite voice announced. "Item, non-approved lawn ornament. Bylaw 17, Section C, Paragraph 4. All lawn and patio decorations must be selected from the pre-approved Whispering Pines Lifestyle Catalog." My brain short-circuited. I was in the middle of a life-or-death battle against a killer robot over a garden gnome. "Item will be cataloged and remediated," the machine declared. A compartment hissed open in its metallic belly, and the gnome was unceremoniously dropped inside. The compartment hissed shut. An old man with a wild mane of white hair and a tattered coat let out a cry of pure anguish. "Bartholomew, you monsters, you finally got him!" The scraper, its primary mission apparently complete, began to retract its arm. Its light switched back from red to blue. This was my chance. Maybe not to be a hero, but to at least not die a comically inept death. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed my rusty pipe, and charged, fueled by a potent cocktail of adrenaline and sheer unadulterated disbelief. "Give him back his gnome, you overgrown Roomba!" I screamed, swinging the pipe with all the ferocity of a disgruntled accountant. I'll say this for my form. It was terrible. I'll say this for my aim. It was worse. The pipe missed the giant metal arm entirely and struck the side of the scraper's chassis with a loud metallic clang. The good news? I got its attention. The bad news? I got its attention. The red sensor swiveled and fixed on me. The arm, which had been retracting, shot back out, this time directly at my face. I yelped and fell backward again, scurrying away like a crab. The claw slammed into the ground where I'd been standing, cracking the pavement. Warning, physical assault on compliance personnel is a level 4 violation, the voice chirped, its politeness now utterly terrifying. Subject identity scan initiated. A beam of light shot out from the sensor and swept over me. I shielded my eyes, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. I was about to be remediated. I had a vague, horrifying image of being folded into a neat little cube, my last moment spent contemplating the irony of it all. But then, just as suddenly, the scraper's arm retracted. Its sensor flashed a series of confused yellow lights. Subject scan failed. Identity not found in resident database. Anomaly detected. Filing report and retreating to designated charging station, pending further instruction. And just like that, the giant machine turned, its treads churning up dust and debris, and rumbled back down the street, joining the others as they disappeared into the urban decay. Silence descended, broken only by the old man's soft sobs for Bartholomew the gnome. Everyone stared at me. Razor, Jinx, the old man, a dozen other grim-faced residents. They weren't looking at me like a hero. They were looking at me like I was a unicorn that had just ordered a latte. Razor was the first to speak, his voice a low growl of confusion. "What the hell are you?" Their hideout was the surprisingly intact basement of a ruined bookstore. The air smelled of mildew and old paper. A single, flickering fluorescent bulb cast long, dancing shadows on the walls, which were lined with scavenged shelves holding not books, but spare parts, canned goods, and an impressive array of makeshift weapons. I was sitting on an overturned milk crate, the center of attention. Razor paced in front of me like a caged bear. Jinx leaned against a workbench, cleaning her welding goggles with a rag, her pink hair a splash of defiant color in the gloom. The old man, who I'd learned was named Silas, sat on a stack of newspapers, occasionally dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. "Let's try this again, newbie," Razor said, stopping his pacing to loom over me. "The scraper scanned you. It couldn't identify you. That's never happened, ever. So, who are you, and how did you get into Sector 7? I took a deep breath. How do you explain an HOA dispute that spiraled into a potential tear in the fabric of reality? "My name is Leo, and as for how I got here, I think I set off the wrong fire alarm." The statement hung in the air, a monument to its own absurdity. Jinx stopped cleaning her goggles. Silas looked up from his mourning. Razor's face, a roadmap of scars and suspicion, twisted into a knot of pure confusion. "You... what?" Razor grunted. "It's a long story," I said. "It involves a woman named Carol, a kitchen renovation, and an unhealthy amount of drywall dust." I told them everything. I told them about Whispering Pines, the nice Whispering Pines, with its manicured lawns and oppressive beige conformity. I told them about Carol, her binder of bylaws, the welcome mat citation, the fines. I told them about the final, glorious act of defiance, disabling the local alarm and triggering the big one. "I thought I was calling the fire department," I finished, my voice weak. "I swear I had no idea any of this existed." Jinx was the first to connect the dots. She pushed off the workbench, her eyes wide with a startling, manic intelligence. Wait. You said she put the main panel on test bypass?" "Yeah, that's what she called it." "That witch!" Jinx slammed her fist on the workbench, rattling a collection of loose bolts. "She didn't put it on bypass. There's a secondary function on those panels, a deep-level administrative override. It's not for maintenance. It's the quarantine and remediate protocol." "The what?" I asked. Silas, the old man, spoke up, his voice raspy with age and sorrow. It's how they created this place, how they deal with repeat offenders. He gestured around the basement. We are all repeat offenders. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Jinx started pacing, her movements sharp and energetic. Okay, look. Think of the Whispering Pines HOA as an operating system. Most of the time it runs on the surface level, fines, warnings, passive-aggressive newsletter entries, but underneath there's a core programming, an automated system designed for ultimate efficiency in maintaining community standards. That's the Scrapers. They're garbage trucks? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. They're compliance bots, she corrected me, exasperated. Sanitation, code enforcement, landscaping, security. It's all one networked system. When Carol flipped that switch, she wasn't just silencing the alarm in your building. She was flagging your unit, 3B, for a level 5 violation. That's the highest there is. It triggers an automatic rezoning. Your physical location, your condo, was digitally cordoned off from the main grid and redesignated as part of the nearest remediation sector. Sector 7. I stared at her, my mouth agape. So, my apartment is still here? Somewhere? But now it's in this place? Exactly, Jinx snapped her fingers. The system generates a localized field or something. The tech is insane, way above commercial grade, that essentially overlays this shithole on top of your reality. You're not in a different place. You're in the same place, just on a different, much crappier administrative layer. And us? Razor growled. We're the ones who were already here. Silas sighed. I was the first, 10 years ago. My gnomes. My eyes widened. Bartholomew? And his brothers, Silas said wistfully. My wife, bless her soul, loved them. The HOA sent warnings. I refused. I said a man's patio is his castle. One day there was a gas leak drill. When I came back, my home was gone, and I was here. Jinx gestured to herself. Unauthorized satellite dish. I wanted faster internet for my gaming servers. They said it disrupted the aesthetic harmony of the roofline. Razor grunted. Christmas lights. Left 'em up till January 5th. Bylaw says they gotta be down by the 2nd. It was the most terrifying, most pathetic, most bureaucratic apocalypse I could have ever imagined. These people weren't hardened wasteland warriors. They were HOA violators. This wasn't a prison for criminals. It was a cosmic penalty box for people who failed to trim their hedges. The fighting wasn't a war for freedom. It was a desperate attempt to stop their non-compliant personal belongings from being confiscated and remediated. So the scraper couldn't scan me, I pieced it together aloud, because I'm not in the system as a resident of Sector 7. I'm an anomaly, a glitch. You're a bug in the code, newbie, Jinx said, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across her face. And that might just make you the most useful thing to happen to this place in a decade. Jinx took me on a tour, which was less a scenic walk and more a grim cataloging of suburban sins. She pointed out the skeletal remains of a tool shed, its foundation now home to a patch of stubborn weeds. Frank's shed, she said. Bylaw 22. No outbuildings exceeding 25 square feet. Frank argued that at 25.1 square feet, it was a rounding error. The scrapers disagreed. We walked past a series of identical, rusted mailboxes, all of them a faded, peeling beige. One, however, stood out. It was bright, canary yellow. Maria's mailbox, Jinx explained. She painted it yellow to cheer herself up. The HOA only approves earth tones. After 3 fines, the scrapers came for the mailbox. Maria tried to stop them. Now Maria lives 3 doors down from me, and the scrapers have her mailbox. The sheer, overwhelming pettiness of it all was staggering. These people had lost their homes, their lives, their connection to the world over rules that were, at best, arbitrary and, at worst, insane. My fight with Carol over dust and noise seemed quaint by comparison. "What about Gus?" I asked suddenly. "My contractor. He was with me when it happened." Jinx stopped walking. "Big guy? Walrus mustache? Looks like he's seen a thing or two?" My heart leapt. "Yeah, that's him. Is he here?" "Oh, he's here," Jinx said, pointing towards a large, fortified structure made from corrugated metal and old tires. A plume of black smoke rose from a makeshift chimney. The scrapers tried to remediate his truck for leaking oil on the asphalt. Big mistake. Apparently, Gus, a man who dealt with building inspectors and zoning commissions for a living, viewed the scrapers as just another layer of bureaucratic nonsense to be overcome. He had managed to disable the first scraper that came for his truck with a well-aimed tire iron, and had since established himself as Sector 7 SS resident mechanic and chief engineer. He was waging a one-man war against automated code enforcement, running a small workshop where he repaired the residents' scavenged belongings and fortified their defenses. He called the scrapers a bunch of over-glorified building inspectors with delusions of grandeur, Jinx said with a grin. He fits right in. A wave of relief washed over me. Gus was alive, he was okay, and knowing him, he was probably already drawing up plans to file a grievance against the entire system. As we walked back towards the bookstore, the reality of my situation began to truly sink in. I was trapped. Trapped in a digital prison created by the very HOA I had been fighting. My clever act of malicious compliance hadn't just brought the authorities to Carol's doorstep. It had thrown me headfirst into the HOA's nightmarish closet, where it kept all its other broken toys. "So, what now?" I asked Jinx, the weight of it all pressing down on me. "Are we stuck here forever?" Jinx looked at me, her eyes glinting with something I hadn't seen before. A flicker of hope. "Maybe not," she said. "Before you, we were just residents in the database. Violators to be managed. But you're an error message. The system doesn't know what to do with you. And a system with an error it can't solve." She smiled, a flash of white teeth in the gloom. "Is a system that can be crashed."